What happens when controlled anger meets live television? And the cameras don't blink. The lights above the studio burned hotter than usual that morning, a white, unforgiving glow pouring down onto the polished table at the center of the set. The View had seen controversy before. Political blow-ups, walk-offs, viral arguments clipped and replayed a million times. But this felt different before it even began. There was a strange tension in the air, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly, the kind that hums just beneath the surface, waiting. Oscar Isaac sat just off stage, jacket folded neatly over his arm, jaw set in a way that suggested calm, but betrayed effort. He wasn't nervous. That wasn't it. He was contained, like a door closed too tightly, hinges creaking under pressure. He glanced once toward the monitors showing the live feed of the hosts chatting, laughing lightly, setting up the segment. Whoopi Goldberg's voice carried easily through the studio speakers. Warm, authoritative, familiar. The voice of someone who had owned this space for years. Oscar inhaled slowly through his nose. He'd done press tours across continents, sat through uncomfortable questions, smiling interrogations disguised as praise. He knew the game. But this wasn't a junket. This wasn't a red carpet. This was live TV. No edits. No safety net. And today, he had already decided he wasn't going to dodge. What happens when a celebrated actor refuses to play polite? The narrator's voice would later say, layered over slow-motion footage of Oscar walking onto the set. What happens when a cultural icon pushes, and the push comes back? Before we go any further, if you're here for intense celebrity moments, raw confrontations, and stories that feel like movies unfolding in real time, subscribe to Stage View right now. Like the video, drop a comment, and buckle in. This one doesn't flinch. The applause cue hit, sharp and sudden. Oscar stepped forward into the light, the audience clapping with that practiced enthusiasm that sounded automatic, but still carried curiosity. He smiled. A small smile. Polite. Professional. The kind that didn't quite reach the eyes. Whoopi turned toward him, sunglasses on as always, posture relaxed, smile wide. She'd introduced presidents, movie stars, survivors, villains. Another actor was nothing new. Oscar Isaac, everybody, she said, drawing out the name. Good to see you. Good to see you too, Oscar replied, voice smooth, warm. If anyone had been listening closely, really closely, they might have noticed how measured it was. He took his seat, nodding to the other hosts. Joy flashed him a grin. Sunny tilted her head, already in analyst mode. Alyssa offered a courteous smile. The table settled. For the first few minutes, it was exactly what it was supposed to be. They talked about the film, the craft, the intensity of his latest role. Oscar spoke thoughtfully, hands moving just enough to suggest passion without dominance. The audience laughed when prompted. Applause came on cue. Everything stayed inside the lines. But Whoopi had been watching him. She leaned back slightly, fingers tapping once against her mug, then leaned forward again. Her tone shifted, not dramatically, just enough. The warmth cooled into something sharper, more inquisitive. You've been pretty vocal lately, she said, peering at him over the rim of her glasses now lowered. About Hollywood. About power. About who gets to tell stories. Oscar nodded. I have. And some people, Whoopi continued, feel like you're angry. The word landed heavier than it should have. Angry. The audience murmured softly. Oscar didn't react right away. He looked at Whoopi, really looked at her, as if deciding how honest he was allowed to be. I don't think anger is the right word, he said carefully. I think it's accountability. Whoopi smiled, but it didn't soften her eyes. See, that's interesting, she replied. Because when men in this industry speak forcefully, it's accountability. When women do it, we're difficult. A few claps rippled through the crowd. Oscar nodded again. I agree with that. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. Do you? Yes. The pause stretched. Then help me understand, she said, leaning in now, elbows near the table. Why your frustration seems to come out when you're the one being questioned. There it was. The camera cut to Oscar's face. Tight shot. No escape. His jaw flexed. Just once. I don't mind being questioned, he said. I mind being reduced. The room shifted. Not audibly, energetically. A subtle lean forward from the audience. A producer's hand hovering near a control panel backstage. Reduced to what? Whoopi asked. To a symbol, Oscar replied. To a headline. To a convenient soundbite that fits someone else's narrative. Whoopi exhaled, a short laugh escaping her. That's live TV, baby. Some laughter followed. Not all of it comfortable. Oscar smiled again, but this time it was thinner. Live TV doesn't mean lazy conversation, he said. Oof. Joy's eyes widened slightly. Sunny glanced between them. Alyssa shifted in her chair. Whoopi's smile faded, not completely, but enough to signal that the temperature had changed. Careful, she said, voice still calm. You're sitting at a table where people have fought to have these conversations. And I respect that, Oscar replied quickly. But respect doesn't mean silence. The audience clapped louder now. A few cheers slipped through. Whoopi straightened, shoulders squaring. Controlled anger, the kind that had made her legendary, began to surface. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Silence, she repeated. No one here is silent. But there's a difference between speaking truth and talking down. Oscar leaned forward for the first time. His hands clasped together, knuckles whitening slightly. I'm not talking down to anyone, he said. I'm talking across. And sometimes across feels like confrontation when people aren't used to being challenged by someone they didn't expect it from. A collective intake of breath swept the room. Whoopi's lips pressed together. The sunglasses went back on, not casually. Deliberately. So now you're saying this is about expectation, she said. About us. I'm saying, Oscar replied, voice steady but edged now, that when I speak with passion, it's framed as aggression. And when I temper it, I'm told I'm not being honest. You can't win that game. Whoopi nodded slowly. Welcome to the club. The audience laughed, harder this time, but the laughter cracked at the edges. Oscar shook his head slightly. Except I didn't build the club, he said. I just walked into it. Silence. Real silence. No laughter. No applause. The control room froze. Producers exchanged looks. This wasn't in the rundown. Whoopi leaned back, crossing her arms. And you think we did? She asked quietly. The question hung there, heavy, layered with history, with decades, with battles Oscar hadn't personally fought but benefited from. Oscar swallowed. For the first time, the armor slipped just a little. No, he said. I think you survived it. And I think sometimes survival hardens into gatekeeping without anyone noticing. Gasps. Audible now. Sunny's mouth fell open. Joy whispered, Oh my God. Whoopi didn't move. For a long moment, she just looked at him. The sunglasses hid her eyes, but not the tension in her jaw. That's a big accusation, she said. It's a big conversation, Oscar replied. And I'm tired of having small versions of it. The audience erupted, half applause, half stunned noise. The applause sign flickered, uncertain. Whoopi raised one hand, silencing the room. When she spoke again, her voice was low, dangerous in its calm. You want big, she said. Then don't come in here acting like you're the first person brave enough to speak up. Oscar met her gaze, or where he thought her gaze was, without flinching. I don't, he said. I came in here hoping I wouldn't have to fight to be heard. The lights seemed brighter now. Hotter. And somewhere backstage, a producer whispered, We're losing control. The narrator's voice would later cut back in, slow and ominous. What no one realized in that moment was that this wasn't the climax. It was only the beginning. The air after that last sentence didn't just feel tense. It felt thin, like one wrong breath could tear it open. For a split second, the studio forgot how to move. Whoopi's hand was still raised, fingers slightly curled, commanding silence without effort. The audience obeyed, the way people do when they sense they're witnessing something unscripted, something that might tip into history or disaster. Oscar sat forward, spine straight, eyes locked ahead. Whatever chance there had been to soften the moment had passed. This wasn't sparring anymore. This was positioning. Whoopi lowered her hand slowly. You don't have to fight to be heard here, she said, voice even, but edged with steel. What you do have to do is recognize where you are. Oscar let out a slow breath through his nose. I know exactly where I am. Do you? She asked. Because it sounds like you walked in ready for war. A ripple of murmurs slid through the audience. Oscar's lips parted, then pressed together again. He wasn't reacting impulsively now. This was deliberate. No, he said. I walked in ready to be honest. The war happens when honesty threatens comfort. Joy leaned forward, trying to steer the moment. Okay, let's... Whoopi lifted a finger. Not sharply. Not aggressively. Just enough. Let him finish, she said. Oscar's eyebrows flickered in surprise. Gratitude? Maybe. Or recognition that this was no longer about winning. It was about surviving the exchange. Comfort, Whoopi continued, is not the enemy of truth. Sometimes it is, Oscar replied. especially when comfort belongs to people who already have power. There it was again. That word. Power. Sunny finally jumped in, voice calm but urgent. Oscar, are you saying the hosts at this table are abusing power? Oscar turned toward her, nodding respectfully. I'm saying power exists in every room, including this one, and pretending it doesn't is how it stays invisible. The audience reacted instantly, applause mixed with groans, a clear split. The camera cut to a wide shot, capturing the divide in real time. Whoopi smiled. A slow, knowing smile. You're very articulate, she said. I'll give you that. Oscar chuckled softly. I've had practice explaining myself. Yeah, Whoopi replied. To people who look like you. That landed harder than anything before it. The studio went dead quiet. Oscar blinked. Once. Twice. Is that what this is now? He asked quietly. You tell me, Whoopi said. Because when you talk about power, you talk like it skipped you entirely. Oscar's voice dropped. I don't think my success erases my experiences. No, Whoopi shot back, but it does change the context. The tension between them became almost physical, like static electricity crackling across the table. The audience could feel it. The crew could feel it. Social media, somewhere out there, was already lighting up, fingers flying across screens. Oscar leaned back for the first time, rubbing his palms together as if grounding himself. I'm not denying privilege, he said. I'm asking for nuance. Whoopi tilted her head. Nuance is earned. And so is listening, Oscar replied. Gasps again. Louder now. Joy looked toward the camera, eyes wide, like she couldn't believe this was happening live. Alyssa shifted, clearly uncomfortable. Sunny pressed her lips together, weighing every word she didn't say. Whoopi exhaled sharply. You came here to challenge us. Oscar nodded. Yes. Why? She asked. Why this show? Because this show matters, he said without hesitation. Because you reach millions. Because conversations here ripple outward. And you thought picking a fight would help? Whoopi asked. I thought telling the truth would, Oscar said. Whoopi leaned forward again, elbows on the table now, voice lower, more intimate, and more dangerous. Truth without responsibility is ego, she said. Oscar met her halfway, leaning in as well. And responsibility without self-reflection is control. The audience erupted. Some people stood. Others shook their heads. Applause thundered and collided with boos. The sound engineer visibly panicked, levels spiking. Whoopi stared at Oscar, lips parted slightly. For a moment, just a moment, something else flickered across her face. Not anger. Not annoyance. Recognition. You think I haven't reflected? She asked. I think you have, Oscar said softly. I think you've done it more than most. That's why this hurts. The room froze again. Whoopi sat back slowly. The sunglasses came off. She placed them on the table with deliberate care, like setting down a weapon. You don't get to tell me what hurts, she said, voice trembling now, not with weakness, but with restraint. Oscar swallowed hard. You're right, he said. I don't. That admission shifted the energy, just slightly. A crack in the wall. Sunny seized the opening. Can we pause for a second? She said. Because this is clearly emotional for everyone. The director's voice crackled in the host's earpieces. We're running long. Try to wrap. Whoopi held up a hand again, not to silence, but to acknowledge. No, she said. We're not wrapping this. A murmur of shock rippled through the studio. This is what people say they want, Whoopi continued. Real talk. Messy talk. So here it is. She turned fully toward Oscar now. You feel dismissed, she said. You feel boxed in. Fine. But don't confuse critique with attack. Oscar nodded slowly. And don't confuse defense with dialogue. They stared at each other. 2 generations. 2 worlds. Same industry. Same cameras. The audience was on edge now, leaning forward, hearts pounding. Somewhere, a phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. Joy whispered, "This is going to be everywhere." Whoopi's voice softened. Not much, but enough to be noticeable. Do you know why this show survives? Oscar hesitated. Because people care. No, Whoopi said. Because we fight in the open. And we own it. She gestured around the table. We don't pretend we're above it. Oscar nodded. Then let me fight honestly. Whoopi studied him for a long moment. Careful what you ask for, she said. Oscar didn't blink. I am. The director counted down in the host's earpieces. 30 seconds. Whoopi turned toward the camera, professionalism snapping back into place like armor. We're going to take a break, she said, voice steady. When we come back, we'll see if this conversation can actually move forward. The applause cue didn't come. Instead, the audience reacted organically, clapping, shouting, arguing with each other as the music swelled awkwardly. Oscar leaned back in his chair, eyes unfocused now, breathing heavier. Whoopi stared straight ahead, jaw tight. The camera light blinked off. But the confrontation? It wasn't over. Not even close. Off camera, as the music faded and the studio shifted into commercial mode, Whoopi turned slightly toward Oscar and said, too quietly for the audience, but loud enough for the microphones still rolling backstage. You better know what you're standing on. Oscar met her gaze and replied, just as quietly, I do. That's why I'm not stepping back. And somewhere in the control room, a producer whispered what everyone was thinking. This is about to explode. The commercial break felt longer than it actually was. In reality, it was barely 2 minutes of ads and upbeat music meant to reset the mood. In the studio, it felt like a holding cell, air thick, time stretched, everyone trapped with what had just been said. The applause sign was dark. The cameras still loomed, red lights off but watching. Oscar hadn't moved much since the cut. His shoulders were tense now, hands clasped together, thumbs rubbing against each other in a small, repetitive motion. It was the first tell. The first crack in the composure he'd held like a shield. Whoopi, on the other hand, was completely still. She stared ahead, lips pressed into a thin line, sunglasses resting on the table like a reminder that she could put them back on at any second. A producer hurried over, crouching slightly to stay out of frame. We're trending already, the producer whispered, voice tight. We need to cool this down when we're back. Whoopi didn't look at her. No, she said quietly. We need to finish it. Oscar glanced sideways, catching the exchange. I'm not trying to hijack your show, he said low. Whoopi finally turned toward him. Up close, the anger wasn't explosive. It was controlled, disciplined, decades old. And I'm not trying to silence you, she replied. But you don't get to walk in here and rewrite history. Oscar nodded slowly. I'm not asking to rewrite it. I'm asking not to be crushed by it. The producer opened her mouth to intervene again, then stopped. The director's voice cut through the earpieces. 10 seconds. We're live. The theme music swelled again, too cheerful for what was about to follow. 5, 4, 3. The red lights blinked back on. 2, 1. Whoopi turned to the camera first, professionalism snapping into place like instinct. Welcome back, she said, voice calm, steady, deceptively warm. We're continuing a conversation that clearly struck a nerve. The audience applauded, hesitant at first, then louder, feeding off the electricity still buzzing in the room. Oscar straightened in his chair. Whatever nerves he had were gone now. This was no longer fear. This was resolve. Whoopi turned back to him. During the break, she said, you said you're not stepping back. So let's be clear. What exactly are you standing on? Oscar didn't hesitate. I'm standing on the belief that respect shouldn't require submission, he said. The reaction was immediate. Applause. A few sharp sounds from the crowd. Someone shouted, say that. Whoopi nodded once. Okay, she said. Then answer me this. She leaned forward, voice dropping. Do you believe this industry owes you something? Oscar frowned. No. Do you believe we owe you something? She pressed. Oscar shook his head. No. I believe conversations owe everyone honesty. Whoopi's eyes narrowed slightly. That's a nice answer. It's a real one, Oscar replied. Sunny leaned in again. Oscar, she said carefully, you keep talking about being reduced. Can you give a concrete example? Oscar exhaled, eyes dropping for a moment before lifting again. Every time I'm asked to represent an entire group, he said. Every time my opinions are framed as from my background instead of from my mind. Whoopi responded instantly. Welcome to womanhood. Laughter broke out, sharp, knowing, complicated. Oscar smiled faintly. I know, he said. And I'm not claiming equivalence. I'm claiming overlap. That word, overlap, hung in the air. Whoopi tilted her head. Overlap implies shared burden. It implies shared struggle, Oscar corrected. Different weights. Same pressure. The audience grew louder now, reacting to every exchange like a tennis match. Applause signs were irrelevant. The room had chosen its own rhythm. Whoopi leaned back, arms crossing again. You know what I hear? She said. Oscar waited. I hear someone frustrated that the rules didn't bend fast enough for him, she said. A sharp intake of breath rippled across the studio. Oscar's jaw tightened. That's not fair. Whoopi shrugged. Neither is the world. The tension snapped tighter, stretched to its limit. No, Oscar said, voice rising for the first time. Not shouting, but no longer measured. What's not fair is being told to wait your turn forever. That did it. The audience exploded. Applause thundered, mixed with shouting. Someone stood up. Another person yelled, "Let him speak." Whoopi raised her voice, not loud but commanding. "I'm speaking now." The room obeyed instantly. "You think we didn't wait?" she said, leaning in, voice shaking just enough to show the emotion beneath the control. "You think we didn't swallow our anger so you could sit here today?" Oscar stared at her, stunned, not defensive now, but hit by the weight of it. "I don't think that," he said quietly. "I know that, and I'm grateful for it." Whoopi shook her head. "Gratitude without humility is hollow." Oscar's voice dropped. "And humility without agency is silence." They stared at each other again, the distance between them feeling smaller now. Not because the conflict had eased, but because it had sharpened. Joy finally spoke, voice trembling. "Can I say something as someone sitting right here between you?" Whoopi nodded. Oscar gestured for her to go on. "This feels less like a fight," Joy said, "and more like two people arguing about who gets to be tired." A hush fell over the room. Oscar exhaled slowly. "That's fair." Whoopi looked down at the table, fingers tapping once, twice. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It is." For a brief moment, something shifted again. The anger didn't disappear, but it rearranged itself. Sunny leaned in. "So where do we go from here?" she asked. Oscar looked at Whoopi. Not challenging now. Asking. "We go where discomfort lives," he said, without turning it into a weapon. Whoopi considered him. Really considered him. The audience watched her face like it held the answer to a riddle. "And if people get hurt?" she asked. Oscar didn't dodge it. "Then we own it. All of us." The silence this time wasn't tense. It was heavy. The director's voice crackled again. 1 minute left. Whoopi turned toward the camera slowly. "This," she said, "is not a neat conversation." A few nervous laughs bubbled up. "And that's okay," she continued. "But don't mistake tension for disrespect." She looked back at Oscar. "Or disagreement for dismissal." Oscar nodded. "I won't." Whoopi studied him for a moment longer, then reached for her sunglasses, paused, and set her hand back down without putting them on. "Good," she said. The closing music began to creep in, awkward and premature. Whoopi faced the camera again. "Oscar Isaac," she said. "Thank you for staying in it." Oscar inclined his head. "Thank you for letting me." The applause came, loud, sustained, conflicted. Not celebration. Recognition. As the cameras pulled back and the red lights dimmed, Oscar finally slumped slightly in his chair, the adrenaline draining. Whoopi exhaled, long and slow, rubbing her temple. Backstage, producers stared at their monitors in disbelief. Phones buzzed nonstop. Social feeds refreshed faster than anyone could track. One assistant whispered, "We didn't just air a segment." Another replied, "We aired a reckoning." Oscar stood, adjusting his jacket. Whoopi rose as well. They faced each other away from the table now, without microphones between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Whoopi said quietly, "You picked a hell of a place to draw a line." Oscar met her eyes. "You picked a hell of a place to hold it." She almost smiled. Almost. And outside the studio walls, the world was already deciding what this moment meant. By the time Oscar Isaac stepped out into the narrow hallway behind the studio, the world had already made up its mind, several times over. Phones were glowing everywhere. Assistants clustered in corners, whispering urgently, thumbs flying. A publicist's voice cracked somewhere down the hall, already halfway into damage control. Screens showed paused frames of Oscar mid-sentence, Whoopi leaning forward, sunglasses off, eyes sharp. Clips were being clipped, captions written before context could catch up. Oscar paused near the exit, leaning one hand against the wall. His chest rose and fell more noticeably now. The controlled anger had burned itself out, leaving behind something heavier. Not regret. Not relief. Consequences. Inside the studio, the audience still hadn't fully settled. Some stood in small groups, arguing in low voices. Others wiped at their eyes, shaken in ways they couldn't quite explain. This wasn't the usual post-show buzz. It wasn't excitement. It was reckoning. One woman shook her head, whispering, "I didn't expect that." Another replied, "None of us did." Whoopi Goldberg remained seated at the table long after the cameras shut down. The lights dimmed slightly, but she didn't move. A producer approached carefully. "You okay?" they asked. Whoopi nodded once. "I'm fine." She wasn't smiling. She wasn't angry either. She was thinking. She replayed the moment in her head. Not the sharp lines, not the applause, but the pauses. The admissions. The way the room had leaned in when neither of them was winning. That was the part that stayed with her. Oscar's publicist finally caught up to him near the exit. "We need to talk," she said, voice tight. "This is everywhere." Oscar glanced at her phone. Headlines were already forming, sharpening into weapons. Oscar Isaac clashes with Whoopi Goldberg live on TV. A disrespectful moment, or a necessary one. The View erupts, viewers divided. He exhaled slowly. "I didn't go in there to fight." "I know," she said. "But intent doesn't trend." Outside, paparazzi had gathered faster than anyone expected. Shutters snapped as Oscar stepped into daylight. Someone shouted a question. "Do you regret it?" Oscar stopped. For a moment, it looked like he might ignore them. Then he turned, eyes tired but steady. "No," he said simply. And that clip, those 2 seconds, would be replayed more than anything else he said all day. Inside the studio, Whoopi finally stood. Joy approached her first. Joy began, then stopped. "That was something." Whoopi let out a quiet chuckle. "Yeah." Sonny joined them. "You think he went too far?" Whoopi considered the question longer than expected. "I think," she said slowly, "he went exactly where he meant to." She picked up her sunglasses, turning them over in her hands. "And I think people are going to hear whatever they're ready to hear." She wasn't wrong. By that afternoon, the internet had split cleanly down the middle. One side crowned Oscar Isaac a truth teller, praising his composure, his refusal to back down, his willingness to challenge a powerful platform without raising his voice. Threads bloomed with phrases like controlled anger, measured honesty. Finally, someone said it. The other side came hard and fast. Disrespectful. Arrogant. Unaware of his own privilege. Accusations stacked on top of each other, stripped of nuance, sharpened for speed. Some called for apologies. Others demanded accountability. And then there were the edits. Short clips that removed the pauses. Removed the admissions. Removed the moments where both of them softened. All that remained were sparks. Whoopi Goldberg trended too, but differently. Some hailed her as a gatekeeper standing her ground. Others accused her of shutting down a younger voice. A few went further, digging up old clips, old quotes, forcing them into a narrative that fit their angle. She watched none of it at first. That evening, alone in her dressing room, Whoopi finally checked her phone. Messages from friends. From colleagues. From people who had been in similar chairs under similar lights. One text stood out. "You didn't lose control," it read. "You held the line." Whoopi stared at it for a long time. Later that night, Oscar sat alone in his hotel room, city lights flickering through the window. The adrenaline was gone now, replaced by that quiet hum that follows a public moment you can't take back. He scrolled. He read too much. Praise stung. Criticism lingered. Then his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Oscar," came Whoopi's voice on the other end. Calm. Familiar. He straightened instantly. "Whoopi." A pause. "You good?" she asked. "I think so," he said honestly. "You?" She exhaled softly. "I've been better. I've been worse." Another pause. Not awkward. Necessary. "You challenged me," she said. "On my own turf." "I know," Oscar replied. "And I didn't take that lightly." "I can tell," she said. "You didn't run." Oscar swallowed. "Neither did you." A faint laugh on the other end. "No, I don't run." The silence that followed was different from the one on set. No audience. No cameras. No applause sign telling them how to feel. "People are going to argue about this for a long time," Whoopi said finally. "I know," Oscar replied. "That's part of it." She hummed in agreement. "Just remember, when you step into fire, you don't get to choose who feels the heat." Oscar nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "And when you guard the fire," he said, "you don't always notice when it's burning the wrong people." Another pause. This one ended with respect. "Get some rest," Whoopi said. "You too," Oscar replied. The line went dead. The next morning, daytime TV opened with it. Late-night shows joked about it. Podcasts dissected it frame by frame. Think pieces multiplied like reflections in a broken mirror. But something quieter happened too. Viewers wrote long posts about feeling seen. About recognizing themselves in the discomfort. about realizing that the moment didn't belong to one person winning over another, but to attention that had been waiting for air. The audience that day hadn't just watched a confrontation. They'd watched two people refuse to simplify themselves for comfort. And that's why it lingered. Not because it was loud, but because it was real. So now it's your turn. Did Oscar Isaac speak truth to power? Or did he cross a line? Did Whoopi Goldberg protect the space, or close it? Drop your take in the comments. This conversation doesn't end when the camera's cut. And if you want more stories that pull you inside the moment, where tension breathes, emotions collide, and nothing is as simple as a headline, subscribe to Stage View right now. Like the video, share it, and stay with us. Because the most explosive moments, they're never just about what was said. They're about what we're finally ready to hear.